Hi there. I just wanted to give you guys some training for the ICE training that you guys have coming up. So ICE stands for Innovation, Creativity, and Entrepreneurship, as you can see in that first slide. Okay. So basically, there's a slide there explaining those. You guys can check that out, what we mean by innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. The next slide is the human knot, which is basically an icebreaker that kind of promotes innovation. So what you do is you essentially have the students stand in circles, cross their arms, and then they hold hands, and then they try to get out of it without letting go of hands. Okay, so that's just a great way to get things going that way. There are 3 gears in ICE that you should know about. The first gear is just identifying the problem, which will be done by our organization or business that we're working with. Whoever's speaking will set up the problem for you. The second gear is brainstorming the problem and developing a prototype. Now, we have some forms to help the students work on that. And gear 3 is testing your solutions. So as a team, they'll test the solutions, and they'll do that again on the worksheet that we'll provide. And then the last, it's not a gear, it's basically just the last piece of it, is called the pitch. And the students will do that on an erasable whiteboard sheet with markers and everything, which will be what you guys have in your kit. Okay? So it's very important that they be in teams. Teams should be about 5 or 6. At the most, ideally about 4, so you're talking 10 teams of 4, and you should have 10 sheets per group, so you should be all good for the teams to be able to do that. And you can just divide them by counting out the tables 1 to 10, and then putting them on a table, count the students 1 to 10. Within this slide deck, you will see some slides that are for the organization. So for instance, in Microsoft, we have McGill speaking, and he's going to set up the problem the students are going to work on. So here's what the first slide, it's meet the organization. And with that, they talk about the history of the organization, the competition and careers within that organization. The next slide talks about what they do. The next slide, what makes the organization unique. The next slide, who are the organization's customers or employees? What are the demographics? And then here, gear 1 is where, for instance, if we're talking about McGill, he's going to set up the problem. And the problem for Microsoft is going to be, how can they break down barriers and educate youth about the fact that stereotypical barriers, and educate youth on how Microsoft is willing to train and hire anyone who's passionate about customer service. They don't need to have the technology, and they don't have to have any of the stereotypes around technology in order to be able to work at Microsoft. So that's the problem they're going to be working on. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to complete the individual idea generation worksheet. Those are in the file as well. You guys should have them. They'll be sent to you. And they basically, it's very important here that the students work individually on these, because we found in the past that if you don't have them work quietly on their own, some of the more quiet students just won't necessarily share their idea. And the whole point of this exercise is to get everybody sharing their ideas. So then, as a team, what will happen is the individual students will share their ideas with the team. So they'll go through all the ideas. So then on the next piece, what they're going to be doing is taking one of the ideas and making it twist so that it's one of their craziest ideas. Okay, and that's, again, just to get some more idea generation going. Then from there, they're going to choose their best idea, okay? So it might be the craziest idea that they put a twist on. It might be one of the other ideas that they had. Doesn't really matter. At this point, they're going to choose the idea that they like the best. Then at this stage, you get out the second worksheet, which is done as a team. So only 1 sheet per team at this piece. And it's the team worksheet, so it's easy to remember. And so this is where we force them to go a little bit deeper, push them a little harder. There's a bunch of powerful questions on that sheet, so that as the teams work through that, they're going to have a little more meat on their idea. And this is when we're getting to the point where we call it the prototype. Then what they start to do is work on their pitch. Now, if you start to see students getting a little fidgety or just a little more hands-on, feel free to hand out those erasable sheets earlier, hand out the markers, get them working on that, because they do have to move from idea to pitch fairly quickly in the course of the day. You should also know that once the person from the organization has done their pitch, they typically leave the room and then they come back just to hear the pitches at the end of the day. And then we have a slide on some tips to help them when they're developing their pitch. So you can just throw that up on the screen as they're starting to work on their whiteboards to give them some more ideas. Okay, and then it's time to make the pitch. Typically the whole process will go anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on the busing requirements and things like that, and depending on what's going on with the rest of the day. Like for instance, with Microsoft, they're going to have a tour at Microsoft first, and then they're going to come back and they're going to hear about the organization. They're going to have lunch, and then they're going to start working on their pitches. So again, it does move fairly quickly, and that's about it. So if you have any other questions, just feel free to contact Laura and I, and hopefully this has been helpful. Feel free to check out the slides. Yeah, and have fun with it.